And welcome, everybody. I am so excited. We have so many folks that are going to join us here today. Welcome, everybody. My name is Mickey Fitch Collins, and I am one of our leadership and human skills facilitators here at Learn It. I am here with my good friend, my pal, Mary Alice Coker. We are going to have a fantastic event today. I want to welcome every single one of our new to the management folks that are out there. We're going to have a really exciting conversation. I'm going to call it a power hour, Mac. I think that's where we're going to go. This event is entirely focused on your first 100 days as a new manager. And as you see on the slide, right, we're talking about building our leadership confidence today. And so this is all about supporting your journey in those first 100 days as a new leader. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. Again, as you can tell, I'm pretty excited for this event. It's going to be a really fun time. The first 20 minutes or so, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to share with you my 6 top tips that I want to bring to you, backed by some research, backed by some experience, backed by all the good things out there that we know that you need to be successful in those first 100 days. Then what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to a conversation between me and Mary Alice about some questions that I have for her. What are some of those things that we need to kind of fill in our tool belt to be successful leaders? Okay. The last 20 minutes or so, we're going to take a look at some of those questions. All of you out there, we got lots of questions that came in on our LinkedIn. We had that Microsoft form that was out there. We got a ton of questions in. Mary Alice and I have had an opportunity to take a look at some of those, and we're going to be fielding some of those questions live here. I also am going to be monitoring the LinkedIn chatter here. And so as you have some comments that are coming in, if there's something that I say or Mary Alice says, you want to go ahead and throw a comment in there or anything like that, please feel free to go ahead and do so. I'm going to be watching those. We're going to bring some of those up on the screen. If you have some questions too, that's a great place for you to bring those things in as well. Okay. Now, before we get into those top tips, what I want to do is I want to introduce my good friend. Look at that. There's a big picture of you, Mary Alice, along with you live. My good friend, Mary Alice Coker. Yeah, look at that. It's like an inception moment right there. So Mac, as we know her, she's the director of people and culture at Big ID. And Mary Alice has about 10 years experience in people and culture and doing a lot of talent and recruitment, learning and development, employee relations, compliance, you name it, she's done it, compensation, benefits, culture, engagement, all sorts of things. In her role at Big ID, she aims to maintain and create a inclusive work environment. And she's all about scaling company culture. And her job is to make sure that the right tools are in the right hands of people to be able to allow them to do their best work. When she is not working, you're going to find her roaming around in New York City, checking out the bustling food scene and all the cool things that the city has to offer. Mac, thank you so much for being here and dedicating your time and energy to be with us here today.
Thanks for having me, Mickey. Really excited to chat, and this is such an important topic that we're going through today. So it's going to be fun.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, for right now, Mac, you get to just sit back and relax a little bit here as I'm going to start to go through a few of our tips here that I wanted to kind of put out for folks. Okay. So what I did was I talked with a bunch of my colleagues and coworkers. I looked at some of the research, and what I did was I've pulled together kind of 6 top tips for those of you as new managers. Okay. And so what I want to do is kind of go through some of those things. And the one that we're going to start with is the one that I think is one of the most dangerous pieces that we can do as a new manager, which is we need to watch out for the cool boss trap. Okay. The thing that's important to know when you are a new manager, you're not here to win a popularity contest. Okay. New managers are folks who prioritize respect and prioritize trust over just being liked. What we know from taking a look at the research, folks, is that those folks that prioritize respect and trust outperform their peers by anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2, right? Pretty significant, right? Focusing on respect and trust, right? You want to be fair, you want to be firm, and you want trust and respect, not friendship and not how cool you are to drive your leadership. Okay. So that's tip number 1, avoid that cool boss trap. The second tip that I want to offer to you is to be thinking about learning. Okay. And that is learning is the path forward. We want to focus on being a sponge. Okay. So when we talk about being a sponge, One of the things that's most dangerous, one of the things we talk about a fair amount here at Learn It, is that being a learn it all is where it's at. Being a know it all, nobody wants to work for that know it all. Nobody wants to work with that know it all. Be a learn it all. Thinking that you know it all is absolutely a leadership dead end, right? What we want to focus on is being continuous lifelong learners. These are the folks that are going to be way more successful in their roles, in their organizations, in their industry, if they look at every opportunity as an opportunity to learn. Really, what I'm talking about here, folks, is growth mindset. What can I do to say my skills as they are today aren't as they are always going to be, but that I continue to grow and learn and acquire new knowledge and evolve and continue to stay ahead. Okay. So that's tip number 2, is to be that sponge. Okay. Coming back to our tips again, thinking about many of you that might be enjoying the summer months as runners, right? I want to point out that leadership is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Now, I used to volunteer at a big marathon that was in my old hometown, and I a couple of times throughout the years, I volunteered at the 5K mark, I volunteered at the 20-mile mark, and I actually volunteered right at the end. It was about 1,000 feet away from the end of the finish line, right? And one thing that separates true marathoners from just everyday runners is that they know it's not a sprint, right? When we think about this, when it comes to being a new leader in those first 100 days, if you're just trying to prove yourself by working 24/7, doing stuff all hours then day and night, right? Congratulations, you're modeling burnout, right? But leaders who pace themselves, leaders who model balance, create teams that are far more productive and healthier in the long term. Set the tone, right? Work hard, rest hard. Work hard, play hard, right? Sustainable success requires sustainable practices. So remember, leadership is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Now, speaking of sports like running and other things, right? One of the other things I like to highlight for folks is that there is no gold medal in the busy Olympics, okay? If your calendar represents or resembles something that looks like a really bad game of Tetris where things are stacking up and you just aren't going to be able to fit anything else in there, it's time for you to make a change, okay? Unnecessary meetings, I call them productivity vampires. They are going to suck and drain the energy and focus out of your work and out of your organization. The reality is nobody's handing out medals in the busy Olympics. So own your time. Okay. Streamline those meetings, keep those essential meetings. When you do that, what you can do as a leader is reclaim that valuable time to be making sure that you're not just focusing on efficiency, but that you're focusing on effectiveness, right? Audit those meetings that are on your calendar to make sure each one of them has a clear purpose, a clear agenda, a clear desirable outcome, and not just that you're meeting with other people just because. This is one of the dangers of having recurring meetings on our calendars. If we don't actually know what we're doing in that particular meeting, if we don't actually have an agenda for it, what we do is we end up just kind of filling that space because it's already there. So make sure that those meeting invitations have clear purpose, clear structure, clear facilitators, stated behavioral outcomes. Things like, by the end of this meeting, we will have made a decision on X. We will come up with 5 ideas for Y. Okay. The 5th tip that I want to offer to you is to remember that there is no I in team. Okay. Some of us probably have heard that phrase before. I feel like that's on one of those motivational posters that you might see hanging up in somebody's office somewhere. There is no I in team. Okay. Leadership isn't about your personal glory. It isn't about your personal standing. It's about elevating your team and your team's purpose and your team's goals and outcomes. If we shift the focus from I to we, what that does is it transforms your group into a cohesive unit that's moving together rather than a bunch of disparate people that might be moving towards a goal. Leaders who prioritize their team needs over personal accolades and personal recognition are the ones that foster environments where employees are way more likely to be engaged and much less likely to have conflict and leave. So my advice to you is check your ego at the door. Focus on the collective success. Now, the final tip that I want to offer to you. And I'm telling you, I am so excited for this conversation with Mary Alice. So we're going to jump right into that in just a moment here, is to focus on making sure that you don't get stuck in the listening trap. Okay. What oftentimes happens is that we engage in all sorts of not so great behaviors when it comes to listening, right? Nodding your head doesn't equate to you actually actively listening. True listening is a leadership superpower. It's a leadership superpower that fosters trust, it fosters empathy, it fosters understanding. At Learn It, we have one of our cardinal cornerstone models is called the ear model of active listening, right? And in that ear model, what it does is it encourages you to focus on being engaged, which is all about being present. It's all about being focused. It's about paying attention. It's about reducing those distractions. It's also about attuning in to the conversation, not just to the words that somebody says, not just to the things that they're talking about, but it's the unsaid things, the emotions, the meaning, the nuance behind those words. And the last part of that is R for respect, right? And that's where what we can try to do is try to be as non judgmental as possible to reduce some of that judgment, to make sure that you're staying open to what that other person has to say. Make sure that you're not jumping to conclusions or that you're not jumping to assumptions. So, that, my friends, is my 6 tips that I want to offer to all of you as we think about being new leaders. What I would like to do now is I want to go ahead and bring my good friend Mary Alice back onto the stage here. We're going to have a great conversation. And you know what? We're going to take the 2 heads of Mary Alice down here and just have the 2 of us here. Mary Alice, again, thank you so much for being here today. I am super excited for the conversation that we're going to have for the next bit of time here.
I'm very excited to be here and to get into it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's do that. All right. So let me go ahead and ask you this first question. And this came in actually, there was a theme that came in from some of the questions that came from the audience. And it actually reinforced this question that I wanted to ask you to start things off. When we think about people that are coming into this management role for the first time, right? First
Mhm.
100 days, first 3 months, what are some things that people can do to intentionally build credibility within their teams? Or maybe on the other side of that, Mac, is what are things that people maybe are unintentionally doing that they might lose credibility within their teams? What do you think about
Yes.
that?
So first, building credibility. I think that when you're a new leader stepping into a team, credibility is something that you earn, and it doesn't. The most intentional leaders aren't doing this by showing how experienced they are, how smart they are, but it's by listening to their team. So you're really getting curious, spending time with the team, asking them thoughtful questions, understanding how the team operates. What are the strengths? What are challenges? What are frustrations? This shows respect for the people, for the work, and it can help build that trust early on. And the next one that I'll say is pretty simple, but it's just following through. If you say you're going to do something, then doing it. That consistency is going to build reliability, and reliability in turn is going to help with your credibility. Um, an important one here is I think is just staying human as well. I don't think you need
Yeah.
to something you touched on before. You don't need to overshare. You don't need to be someone's best friend. But I do think that it's important in a leadership role. We're not perfect. We don't know everything. So keeping that mindset, staying open to feedback, that's going to create an environment where people do feel safe. And whenever you show up as a real person, um, that's who people are gonna, like, more, um, kinda get used to earlier. On the flip side, I will say, I think it's often really small missteps, that make leaders, lose credibility. A really common one, I think, is, over-promising and under-delivering. Leaders want to be supportive. So they might say, I'll take care of that, or I'll follow up with you on it. And then they don't. And whenever this happens a couple times, maybe it becomes a pattern. People are going to start questioning whether they can rely on you. Um, the other one that I see pretty often is just being too quick to assert your authority without understanding the context. Like if you make a decision without understanding um, what's already been tried. I think often it can come from a place of good intent. Maybe you're just trying to move fast, but that can come across as dismissive or out of touch to a team.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that. I mean, when you first started talking and I was like, "Oh yeah, over-promising and under-delivering," and then boom, you said that, right? But I do think you're right about this having there are these micro actions that
Mhm.
have micro reactions, but they compound over time, right? The
Yeah.
overpromising and under-delivering on, "I'll follow up with you tomorrow about X," right? It may not be this life-altering sort of thing, but if that's the 4th or 5th or 6th time that you've done that sort of thing and not followed through, right? People start getting wise to that. People start expecting that as the norm rather than you actually following through and doing what you said that you were gonna do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. There's I oftentimes, you and I have talked about this before too about like the definitions of trust, and trust is about dependability and predictability, right?
Mhm.
And when we think about our spouses and partners and friends and family, right? That's where trust comes from, is I can predict how this person is going to show up and what they might say and how they might
Mhm.
behave, and I can also depend on them.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is that is just absolutely critical in those first 100 days, because people need to know that you are a rock for them, right? That they can lean on you.
Yeah, I think, a important point here too, is that the team wants to know, like, whenever you're stepping in, is that you're there for them. You're there to protect them, to advocate for them, with stakeholders, that you're there to clear roadblocks so they can thrive. They wanna see that, like, that you can get in the weeds with them, um, from the get.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Well, we're going to move into our second question. I just want to remind everybody who's tuning in here to feel free, if you're on LinkedIn, if you want to drop any comments to anything that Mac is bringing to us, please go ahead and do so. Really appreciate that. Mac, the second question that I want to ask you, okay? We all have that inner voice. We all have that inner narrative. Okay. What are some of those common inner voice or inner narrative things that new leaders hear in those moments of confidence versus those moments of doubt, right? Like, what are some of those phrases or some of those things we tell ourselves? And specifically around those doubt ones, what do we do to reframe some of that stuff?
Yeah, I think that that voice is normal. Everybody carries it around, and in confidence, that voice is saying things like, I'm adding value. This is why I was hired, or this is why I was promoted into this role. I've got this. But that can flip pretty quickly, I think, to hearing things like, what if I mess this up? Or I'm not ready for this. Or they're going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing. Um, I think, again, this is normal. It's just a part of stretching into a bigger role. As far as reframing, I think it's all about shifting your mindset from a place of self-criticism, and fear to self-compassion, and
Mm,
learning, and really going into that growth mindset, Mickey, that you were talking about earlier. I think first off, just normalizing the doubt. Feeling uncertain doesn't mean that you're failing. It means that you're learning. And I
mm,
think it's also switching that narrative to, what if I mess up? To, okay, it's okay if I mess up, but how can I learn from it? How can I learn from that experience? That shift takes the pressure off of, the idea of perfection, and instead, um, growth, and progress. Um, Something I've also found super helpful personally too is just talking about it, finding someone, whether it's a peer, a mentor, a coach, anyone that you can be real with, and naming that doubt, naming what you're feeling, often tends to, like, to shrink it, and then you can realize, oh, it's not just me.
yeah. Yeah. I think that the normalizing thing that you mentioned is so critical. I mean, I think about every new leadership position that I've taken on, there's always that, am I the only one that's ever felt this way? Am I the only
Mhm.
one that's experiencing this, right? How come it seems like I'm the only one that's struggling or whatever? And that normalization is also like we're normalizing imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that this was even really a term that people were talking about until maybe about 10 years ago or so. But,
Yeah.
this idea that, oh my gosh, like somebody's going to find me out and realize they made this bad decision of putting me into
Hmm.
this leadership position. And then when you talk to folks, I mean, this from your role. I know this from my role, is that people all the time, we all have imposter syndrome, right? Our CEO, Damon,
Absolutely.
talks about this in
Absolutely.
his Learn It All Leader book, right? Of like, the idea of imposter syndrome can really hold us back a lot. But that reframing, as you mentioned, like how do we turn some of that stuff around? I love your connection to find mentors, friends,
Hmm.
confidants, right? Because some of that is normalization and some of that is reframing some of that. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
right on, right on. So, you mentioned this, find other people. And, I maybe that's mentors, maybe that's previous supervisors, whatever it is, right? But we all know our supervisors and those with, I'll say, more seasoning, we'll put that in air quotes, more seasoning, right? These are the folks like we should tap into for support, right? We always want to encourage people to kind of work the hierarchy in the best
Hmm.
possible way, meaning, go to my supervisor, my skip level supervisor, whatever this is. But where else would you suggest for new leaders to look to find some of those mentors, to find some of those supports to help build their confidence?
Yeah, I think, supervisors and season leaders are great. Um, but I find that sometimes my best support comes from other places. One place that I'll often look to and that I recommend is peer networks. I've found really just validating and practical support um, by talking to people who are navigating the same or similar challenges that I am. And it's nice just to talk about ideas, what we're going through, what's worked, and also what hasn't worked. I think it's
Mm,
extra important to talk about those pieces too. And it's also grounding because it reminds you that you're not alone. Um, Another place that I've found helpful and I recommend is just going to your own team, asking them for feedback, inviting their ideas, and just really listening to them. That's going to help build trust with them. And when they see that you're learning with them, it's going to boost your credibility and your confidence.
mm,
Um, I also think, I mean, forums like this are always very, very helpful. And there are a ton of resources out there. I mean, there are podcasts for days, there are books, there are leadership communities, and just hearing, how others have navigated similar journeys is always helpful. And something as simple as like a 20-minute podcast from a leader that you admire can really help you shift your mindset on something.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. And the sometimes some of the best support we can get is that external, right? Or even that third party, like I don't actually know this person in real life, but I admire, I mean, I think
Hmm.
about some of the folks that I follow on LinkedIn and stuff. I really admire their work, or I've read their books, or I listen to their podcasts. We haven't met in real life, but I feel really seen and really heard by that, right? And there's something to be said from that too. Um, I love what you said too about thinking about peer networks, right? Other people that are either in kind of similar bands in the
Hmm.
organization, right? My particular focus has always been on middle managers, right? Kind of that crunch, that's that pressure, the push-pull pressure that middle managers experience, but finding other people that are in similar roles. And not just, we want you to lean into the hierarchy, right? Have
Hmm.
that good relationship with your supervisor, but having those peer networks or folks that are in your industry, but also in similar types of roles as you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think peer networks are especially helpful too, depending on the size of your organization. If you're a small company and you're, let's say 50 people, it could be a lot harder to to find someone to lean on. But if you're at a 3,000 organization, it's going to be probably easier to find those people internally that you can like learn from and work with.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Good. 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 We have some questions that are coming in. We're gonna hold those questions until we get to that kind of Q&A section when we get to in just a little bit here, because I do want to ask a couple more of these other questions that I've been kind of pondering about a little bit, and I want to switch gears, Mac, to talking about delegation. One of the things, I mean, you mentioned this before about sometimes new leaders are like, "Oh, let me take this for you, or I can take this on," or, trying to kind of prove your worth. learning how to delegate is a really hard task.
Mhm.
Um, why do why is it so important for leaders to learn how to delegate really early on in their new manager role as opposed to when they get there?
Yeah, I think a lot of new leaders believe that if they delegate too much, then people won't think that they're doing enough. But delegating shows that you trust your people, trust their skills, and their judgment, and it's going to build loyalty and trust on both sides. That's also how your team grows. If you're delegating really thoughtfully, it's going to stretch and develop your team while also freeing you up to lead, which I think is one of the most important parts here.
Mm,
Leader that like shift into a leadership role, you're going from probably doing everything yourself to then going into thinking bigger picture. And if your role stays too tied to execution, you're probably not going to have the space to coach your team, anticipate changes, be proactive. um, and with that, I think if you're carrying everything, you're likely going to get overwhelmed, you're going to get
mm,
burnout, and your team is going to feel that, which is obviously what we want to avoid. Delegating can really help you stay focused on um, the things that I think matter, like that can matter most, like on, maybe it's alignment within your team and with cross teams, crucial decision making, and developing and coaching your team members. Is a tough one, Mickey, and I will say this is one that I feel like it took me longer to learn this. How did you learn to delegate? How did you navigate this journey yourself?
I I appreciate that you're turning the tables on me here, Mac, and part of the reason why I asked that question was both thinking reflecting back on my own journey as well as, like, watching and helping grow other new leaders for a good bit of my career. I didn't do very well with this, and I think probably similar to you I think similar to a lot of people,
Yeah.
you're so focused in on I want people to see how valuable I am and that I'm the right pick for the role and
Mhm,
all this sort of stuff. And it wasn't until I when I was in those manager roles, it wasn't really until I became a middle manager and I was starting to be invited to the table and my opinion was starting to be asked for by the senior level folks and the vice president level folks. And what
mhm,
I realized was, and you said this beautifully, when you're too close to execution, you don't have enough of that space to be thinking about some of those things. And when I realized that I was getting asked these questions or like, come to a meeting and
mhm.
talk with us about this, I just didn't have much value to bring because I was so focused on getting things done
Yeah.
that I didn't really dedicate any mental power, right, to making space for myself to think about some of this other stuff. I also realized it kind of a both and. I also realized that I wasn't delegating and I wasn't teaching other people and I wasn't helping build skills in
Mhm.
the people that were on my team. And I realized I was like, this is the exact opposite of what I should be doing. Right. And so it was that kind of twofold realization of I'm not doing enough to help develop my people, as
Mhm.
well as those above me were asking for my thoughts and opinions. And I just didn't have it available because I was just so focused on getting things done. That was a real wake up call for me. And that's
Yeah.
when I started and I had to be I think similar to you what you said, I had to be very intentional about saying, "Okay, wait, is
Mhm.
this something," kind of going through a process. We talk about the delegation green lights in our workshop. Like, is this something that I can delegate to somebody else? Does somebody
Mhm.
else have the skill sets? Do I have the time to help kind of teach and train them up with it? Oh yeah, I sure do, right? Let's make it
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
It's not an easy skill to come by though. You have
Yeah.
to be pretty intentional about it. Yeah.
Definitely. It takes time. Probably my toughest one.
Yeah, is learning to delegate? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is interesting because I think we're talking a lot. You said growth mindset a few times, and we're talking about kind of some of these mental awareness pieces. What are what would you say is probably one or two big mindset shifts that folks that are brand new to management need to make to be successful in their role? Maybe it's about delegation. Maybe it's about something else.
Yeah, I think there's a big shift from thinking about my success is about what I can do versus what I'm empowering others to do. I think this shift matters a lot because as an individual contributor, you're often rewarded for your output. Maybe you're the expert on something. Maybe you're the go-to, and the person that's delivering. But whenever you step into a leadership role like that type of that mindset, that approach can hurt you. It's not about being the smartest person in the room anymore. It's about how you're creating space on your team for people to shine, to grow. It's removing blockers for people, getting clarity for folks, and giving them feedback. Really, just like trying to create that environment where people can do really good work. Of course, those mindset shifts take time. They're not easy, but I think once those kind of lock into place, that's when like your confidence as a leader can really grow. That trickles to your team, where your team can get to a place where they're thriving. You're leading with more purpose versus just like managing tasks day in and day out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big I mean, it's a big shift as you say. I mean, these are not things one of the things that, I hear from new to leadership folks is why is this taking so long?
Mhm.
And leadership is a patience game, right? It's
Yeah.
not something that you go to bed one night and we wake up the next morning and you have all the solutions, right? And I think you're right to say, I mean, these are mindset shifts. These are things that are organic. They develop
Mhm.
over time. But if we can be thoughtful and intentional about them from the get go, that makes a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mac, I want to bring in the elephant in the room, right? The topic that everybody is talking about these days. And if you're not talking about it, you should be talking about it. And that's AI. Okay. And obviously, we could get into a huge philosophical discussion for hours and hours about AI and kind of where it fits in. There's so many exciting developments and so many
Mhm.
exciting opportunities for us on the personal level and the professional level of how we can use AI. Thinking about this in the context of building leadership confidence and for folks that are brand new to being a manager for the first time, what are some thoughts, some ideas, some recommendations that you have about how new leaders can use AI as either a coach, right? So kind of talking about that partner, coach, mentor sort of piece, or how they could use AI as a thought partner to help them build some of these skills and help them build some of that leadership acumen.
AI, it's coming up all the time. Everybody's talking about it, and it's really helpful. I mean, I think in the day to day, I think AI is very helpful to um, if you're making a tough decision, like to talk about it, to have basically someone you can bounce ideas off of, prep for conversations, or even get feedback on your thinking about something or your stance. For me, I feel like sometimes AI can help validate something that I'm thinking to be like, hey, can you
Mhm,
play the other side? Then I'll say, okay, yes, my mindset was like I'm feel pretty firm about my approach that I'm going to take here. I also think AI can, it's obviously a huge time saver. It can
mhm,
provide really great templates for like tough messages if you're planning a one-on-one, if you're setting goals. Of course, I think what not everyone is doing with AI that I think they should is like humanizing it. It's like don't just copy paste what AI is spitting out. Like make it your own. Make sure that you are like putting your own touch on things.
mhm,
Um, Something that I've found AI to be really helpful in, both for myself, but also as I work with different leaders, is just how you're kind of shaping your own learning journey. As we talked about, there's so much out there. There's so many resources, be it podcasts, books, um, whatever it is. Let's say you can like name, I want to grow in X topic. You can ask AI, and I think it can help kind of sort through the noise and give you some like really good recommendations on where to start. If you say, I really want to um, improve in my maybe it's my executive presence and how I show up in front of leaders, I think it can give you a really good like jumping off point and some really good initial recommendations. I think overall AI can just help you be like, more efficient. But having that sort of thought partner, especially if you don't have like that mentor network yet, and that's something you're still building early on, and finding your people, it can kind of be a stand-in until you have some of those people. And even while you have it, still to be like, let me validate, let me look other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, I love that idea of the validation as well as the, like, poking holes and looking at things from another angle, yeah. DJ commented, I put this up on the screen here, AI has it all, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And there's so much, I mean, when we think about that, the possibilities really are endless. There's another question, that actually I'll show this one and we'll tackle it maybe a little bit later. There was another question that came in just a little bit ago, from one of our viewers here on LinkedIn about any recommendations on books or podcasts for management and leadership that would appeal to millennials and Gen Z managers? And one of the books, since we're talking about AI, one of the books that I'd love to give a shout out, to specifically around AI is The AI Driven Leader, by Jeff Woods. And Jeff is spelled Geoff. Jeff is a friend of Learnit's, and this was a fantastic book. I feel like I'm always talking about
Mhm.
this book, but I read his book last fall when it came out. We had him on. We had a special event like this in January, and he's done a couple. He's done our Learn It All podcast with our CEO Damon Lemby, and that book is a tremendous book because it really, you talk about mindset shifts, really helps people think about how do I be a leader who's really using AI as both not just a task helper, but really a thought partner, a productivity partner, a idea booster, right? And not necessarily answering the question, can AI help me with this? But how will AI help me with this? Right. And that feeds in exactly to what you were saying is, kind of using AI as a coach, as a mentor, as a validation tool, as a poke holes in my arguments sort of tool. Yeah. Awesome. So, Mary Alice, mistakes. Let's talk about those. Okay. We've probably made a few. I think between you and I, we could probably count up a few mistakes that we've made over the years, maybe early in our management days. What are, for any of us that have made that transition from on Friday, I'm peers, on
Mhm.
Monday, I'm the supervisor, right? So going from peer to manager. What are a couple of mistakes that maybe either you yourself have experienced if you've done that, or you've seen other people when they go from that peer to manager role? What are a couple of those mistakes that people make? And what would you suggest as the remedies?
Yeah, this is actually something I feel like you touched on it a bit whenever you did your intro and you did your initial tips. Two of the common things I see new leaders that sometimes hold back from setting really clear boundaries or making
Mm,
tough decisions because they want to keep their friendships or they don't want to rock the boat. And I think oftentimes this can kind of blur the lines and undermine authority. Um, on the flip side, I think that I've also seen a lot of leaders just be overly strict or distant, like right away.
mm,
Um, and that can, I think, create some resentment and definitely hurt like the trust that you need. Um, this is a tough one, but it's about finding that balance and like being clear about your new role, while also staying like approachable, and respectful to the team members. I also think um, whenever you were a peer with them and then you're moving into a manager, there are probably like pain points that you might know about, that you all like talked about whenever you were peers. Those are things I feel like you can start to like lean into. It's like, are there things that we can, maybe you and I griped about this one thing because it was really frustrating. It's like, how can we now like work together? And how can I help to now solve this? And now that I'm in this
right.
elevated position.
Yeah. Great point and great turnaround with that, right? Is thinking about those things. Yeah, those conversations that maybe we had in confidence, that maybe it was a little bit of venting, and now all of a sudden you organizationally and hierarchically have access. You have some power, you have some privileges. What are some things, right, that you can do then? And I love that because not only does that give you an opportunity to create a win
Mhm.
for one of your teammates who's now a direct report, right? But it also, I mean, I think it gets back to that very first question I asked you about building credibility, right?
Yeah.
That you're not just going to be a leader by title, but that you're a leader by action. That part of being a leader is about clearing obstacles and removing some of those challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, one more question, Mac, before we move
Mhm.
into some of those audience questions that we have laying out there for us. What is one leadership lesson that you wish you had learned earlier on in your career?
So this is one we touched on, so I'll keep it short. It was delegation, for sure. I I think in my career, my natural instinct is to raise my hand. If I see a gap, I'm like, let me fill it. If I see something that is that could be done better or something, I'm like, let me get in there. That really helped further me in my career, and I think go like further faster. Um, then I got into a management role, um, and I had to make a shift because at some point I was like, "Wow, I have so much on my plate."
Mm,
But now I have different expectations around me as well. So um, that delegation piece, I wish that I started to offload some sooner because I feel like I definitely probably approached a place of like burnout where I kind of had to backtrack and say, okay, let me reprioritize and like look at everything on my plate and then see how I like thoughtfully now take this to my team and start to coach them and stretch their skill sets so then I can get to a place where um, things are smooth sailing again.
yeah, yeah. That's so relatable to me. I think you and I probably, maybe had some parallel leadership
For
journeys.
sure, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, delegation and again, folks, that are watching this, I mean, you heard it in the responses that Mac provided to us before, and obviously it's coming back around again. I don't know that I could emphasize enough the importance of building those delegation skills, again, early on in your leadership. And I think the challenge, coming back to my tip before that, I said there's no I in team. I think one of the greatest challenges is people want to feel like they're proving themselves and I'm the right pick and this is
Mhm.
good and I have the skills. But we tend to overdo that, right? Because we want to over validate our existence in that role. And so therefore what we do is we either completely don't delegate or we delegate meaningless sort of tasks to other people
Yeah.
because we feel like we're delegating, right? So I think if there's a big takeaway that I can offer to folks, you're hearing it a couple of times, right? Build up some of those delegation skills. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Mac, if you're good, I'd like to go ahead and switch over
Yeah.
to some of our audience questions. We had one, and I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the screen here that came in from Laura on LinkedIn, and I'll go ahead and read it. Could you provide advisement on new leaders who are younger than the team they're managing and handling gossip with those members and creating cliques and excluding other members of the team they're managing? How to keep the peace and keep our team all inclusive, especially since the team is small? Whew.
Mm.
Thank
It's
you, Laura,
it's
for that question. Yeah.
it's a good question. It definitely happens pretty often. I I want to get your input here too, Mickey, but I think it's really important to have honest conversations with folks. I think your direct reports like pay attention, and whenever you avoid hard conversations, or maybe like you have hard conversations with some people but not others, people notice whenever there's like sort of like uneven treatment or uneven expectations with something like that. I think that kind of approaching it easy, but you have to you have to address it with the folks. And I know it can be challenging if um like depending on your age gaps with folks,
Mhm.
but I think trying to like nip it in the bud early um and we want to have an environment where obviously people are friends, people can work really well together, but where when there's like sort of like petty gossip and stuff like that, there's just not something that we should have in the workplace, and just having that conversation with folks. I mean, what do you think, Mickey?
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely been here. It's funny because I'm now no longer that younger than everybody else person in my roles, but I for many years I was quite a bit younger than a number of the folks that I supervised, and I mean, I had right, wrong, or indifferent, I had some of those supervisees that would say things to me. I'm old enough to be your mother, and it's like, yeah, yeah, you are, right? And I'm here organizationally, right? And so I think some of it is, I mean, you talked about a couple of the notes I wrote down earlier. You talked about humanity, humanness, self-compassion, listening, follow through. You also just mentioned conflict management. And, I think a lot of this is when some of these behaviors perpetuate, whether it's clicks or kind of excluding certain folks, I think it's because for a lot of humans, we're naturally conflict avoidant, right? And people don't want to ruffle feathers in the workplace. But the way that I look at it is, especially when organizationally you're put into a leadership position, the organization has chosen you to be that leader, which means it is now your job to help your team be the best version of itself so that the organization can be the best version of itself too, right? And in order to do that, that means we all need to be together, which means we need to have some difficult conversations first so then we can be together after, right? I have hosted some very, very challenging, very honest conversations where I have directed, and I'll put that comment back up, like where I have said to folks, listen, I know and I can see these different pockets, right? Friendships is one thing. Workplace exclusion is a whole nother thing. Here's the expectations that I have in terms of how we're including people, because if we're operating in two or three different directions, we definitely aren't all going in the same direction. And, the small team piece, Lara, that you put in there too, especially since the team is small, that's even more critical with small teams because you can't have a few people going in a few different directions and say that there's going to be any level of success. And so my advice or guidance would be having those difficult conversations and saying, this is what I'm observing, right? We don't want to do hearsay stuff, but this is what I'm observing. This is what I've seen. This is what I've read. These are the behaviors, this is the body language, whatever it is. And addressing those things and saying, I'm going to be a leader that operates with honesty and candor rather than the one that just kind of smooths things over and hopes that it doesn't affect things. Yeah.
And Mickey, I want to jump on the back of that a little bit. I think after you've had those difficult conversations and around it, depending on the nature of your team, whether it's remote or if it's in person, especially if it's in person, kind of having some like forced family fun, um, like scheduling something for the entire team, being really intentional about it, and obviously having everyone there, having an inclusive event. I do think that after you've had that, to have a sort of reset moment for your team to say, okay, now we've had these tough conversations, let's let some time pass and then do something all together to see. How is it if we're being really thoughtful about how we're spending our time together and how we're treating each other.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's a need for my wife is a psychotherapist and she always talks about the need for repair after there's been some type of a conflict or some type of a fissure, right? The repair piece is just as important as the conflict, and kind of working through the conflict is making sure that you're doing the repair afterwards. And whether that's through a social activity, whether that's through recognition of like how we've moved through it, kind of naming some of those pieces. Yeah, I mean, we got to come back together as humans, right? Because ultimately in the workplace, we want to have, you don't need to be best friends with everybody, but we do need to have healthy relationships in order to be functioning. Yeah. So, Mac, there's another question that I got earlier on that came in. How do you balance confidence and humility as a first time leader, right? So, we talked a little bit about like waning confidence and struggling confidence, but also there's the other side of that of like what happens maybe when people are a little too much. Like, how do you balance confidence and humility?
I think it starts with knowing your strengths and being able to really use your voice while also recognizing that you don't have all the answers. Um, as a first-time manager, I recommend like asking a ton of questions, probably listening more than you're speaking, especially in those first 90 days, and just learning from all the people around you. Confidence is, I think, what can get like projects and different things moving, but it's like the humility side is what's gonna keep you, connected to your team and, like, credible to them too.
Yeah, yeah. Maintaining your humanity, right? Still being a person and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you handle the different needs, or how would you recommend you're being hired from the outside and you're coming in as a new manager from the outside
Mhm.
versus I'm being promoted internally, right? So we kind of talked about that peer to manager thing. How do you handle that? Kind of the
Yeah.
differences between I'm coming in from the outside versus coming in internally.
Sorry, there was a little delay, but I think I got the question.
No
Um,
problem.
I'd say for an external hire, I would focus on onboarding them into the culture, like helping them build relationships, understand some of the unspoken like norms of the company, and also gain some quick wins. On the other side, for internal promotions, it's more about supporting like the identity shift of the team member, coaching them through going from peer to manager for folks, maybe helping with their with setting boundaries and just building confidence in the role. Um, both need support. They're just different.
Yeah. Yeah. One more question that I would ask you, kind of going down this concept of the peer piece, okay? Um, One of the questions again that came in ahead of time kind of said, I was curious about what's the counterintuitive insight that you would offer around managing. You used to be my peer and now you're my direct report. And this person said, a lot of the advice, and again, what we shared today, a lot of that advice is around kind of setting boundaries and those, kind of having those direct conversations. But the question came in is there a deeper psychological shift that needs to happen for either that new leader or or their former colleagues when it comes to making that shift peer to manager, more than just the setting boundaries? Is there something, a bigger psychological shift there?
I don't know if it's necessarily a bigger psychological shift. I think it depends on maybe what the relationship was, like how close were you with the peers, like kind of what was that working dynamic um, before you became their manager. Um, I think it really depends on the situation. Um, I like the boundary setting. I think is something that I've found like that I found most helpful, and um, maybe there were things that I talked about with um, my former peer whenever we were peers, but then I'm maybe not going to talk about it in the same way. I'm still going to try to be human and have pieces, but I mean, I feel like for me, it was like mostly the boundary setting. I don't see it as a psychological shift, but Mickey, you have that insight, especially in your household. So I'm curious about what you say here.
Yeah, I mean, I what I would think, I think one of the biggest shifts is, right, wrong, or indifferent. I think that there is a sense a lot of times in a lot of organizations that management or supervisors are the enemy, right?
Mm,
That them, right? This them versus us versus
mhm,
them thing. When you go from being an us and then you become a them, there's a shift, a mindset shift that happens for you as the leader, but there's also a shift that happens for your peers, right? Which is, well, hang on a second. You're my buddy and my pal, and now you're part of them. And like, what do I do? How do I make sense of that? And so for me, I think the response that I would have to that is that mindset shift is that we don't have to have enemies, and there doesn't have to be this
mhm.
dichotomous us versus them within organizations. We have different roles and different insertion points, different slices of the pie or lenses through which we view things. And now your lens is changing because you're
Yeah.
a new manager, right? So I think that's one of those kind of old adages that people operate with. It doesn't have to be this us versus them, management is the enemy sort of thing. Yeah.
And I think that's where I totally agree with you, Mickey. Something we talked about a bit before. I think that's where you can kind of um, so early on, how are you going to show up for your team? How are you going to like protect them, perhaps shield them in times? I think especially really early on, it's like um, showing I'm here to help you.
Mhm.
I'm here to help in this situation. Like let's not go into that where yes, now I'm the enemy, I'm the manager, I'm the enemy.
Mhm.
What wins can we get early on together, and how can I um, help to remove the barriers in your like day-to-day role.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Mac, I have one more question. I'm going to bring it up on the slide here. I know that there's some other questions that have come in on LinkedIn, and we'll address some of those through some comments. But this question that came in says, appreciate the conversation about managing teams. Can we talk about managing up since we're dealing with multiple generations and various communication styles in our professional environments? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're digging.
Yeah, I think managing up can be really tough for sure. What I always like to do, what I talk to my managers and leaders about, is just having like really upfront conversations, like um, at the start of a relationship of Mickey, can you keep the question up so I make sure I address the right points?
You bet.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Is just having an upfront conversation to say like how do you like to receive feedback? How do you like to um, how is this feedback dynamic going to work for us? And I think especially upward is having that with your manager and normalizing feedback. I think a lot of times like companies have either annual or biannual reviews, and upward feedback may be a part of that process. Um, it's not always a part of that process, but I think that if you try to start the dynamic to say like, hey, feedback's really important to me. I want to make sure that on my journey that I'm getting that feedback, but I'd also love to like make sure that I have the space to provide it to you. And
Mm.
coming at it from like a genuine place, I think it's all about the tone and how you go about it. I think is a really like good place to start. And I will say I see this is this is this is a hard one. My company now, we have 26, we operate across 26 countries. We have a lot of different um, sort of cultures and communication styles. And personally, I had to learn how to work with different cultures. There are some of the cultures within my company that are very very direct, they are firm. And at first I was like, do these people hate me? Why won't why like how are like we are not driving. Then I had to learn like, oh, it's not me. It's just that we have very different ways that we communicate. And it's kind of then just being open about here's how I do things. How do you do things? I kind of went off tangent here, but related. What do you think,
Yeah.
Nikki?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is direct and open communication. And again, I mean, we need to wrap ourselves up here in a moment, but I think that getting to know other people as humans and not
Yeah.
making assumptions about like what do we think about how they communicate or what they want. Um, we actually, and this is actually going to be a great promo for an event that we have coming up next month. We just posted that our event for next month is going to be about the middle management crunch and multi generational workforces. And so, for the person that put that comment in there, definitely make sure that you tune in for that one. But I mean, I think a lot of it is just getting to know people on that personal level. How do you want to be communicated with? What's important to you? What do I know to be true as opposed to the assumptions that I'm making? Right? Yeah. Well, I do need to go ahead and wrap us up. I can't believe our power hour is over already, Mac, right? But I want to say thank you so much. Mary Alice Coker coming to us from Big ID. She is one of our absolutely most favorite organizations to work with. I know that I'm so excited every single time I get the opportunity to get together with you, Mac. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the insights. I feel like I took some of the notes written down here on our conversation today. Really rejuvenating. And I do hope for everybody who's in the audience, that you feel like you have some good information to build that leadership confidence. I do want to go ahead too, and I encourage people, please connect with Mary Alice. You can find her on LinkedIn. Mary Alice, if you want, I can post your LinkedIn right onto the event page here. If people want to continue some of the conversation, she's a fantastic person to get to know and learn from, and lots of great experiences. And so, to everybody who's out there, or perhaps some of you that are supervising some of these new managers, my hope, if we think about some of the things that Mac brought to us today, listening, follow through, credibility, understanding that imposter syndrome is real, normalizing that experience, setting expectations, right? Remember all of these things in our interactions as new leaders. The other thing that I just want to put out there too is that this event, while it will end in just a moment here, it will be available to you in perpetuity. And so if there's somebody else that you think needs to see this, you can go ahead onto LinkedIn. You can hear that share button, or you can hit that share button. You can share this out. You can create a new post from this event. If there's something that you want to bring to your networks, please go ahead and do that. Please tag Mary Alice in there, tag me in there, tag Learn It, tag Big ID, right? That is going to be a great way for us to continue the conversation. So once again, everyone, thank you so much for being here, Mary Alice. Again, thank you so much for being such a wonderful partner to us at Learn It and such a good pal to me. Everybody out there, have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon. Take care, everyone.